Hey, Plaid Man here. I know I'm basically wearing the same outfit. I put on a hat, Snot Rocket, Ink, or Co. Ink. Hey! Repping my good friend Eamon Van Dyke. His son has this company. And then I'm wearing a plaid shirt, which is way too hot for, but I have not figured out the place to buy long sleeve or even short sleeve plaid for summer wear. So I have a bunch of winter wear plaid, but I don't have summer wear plaid. It's a problem because I live in Southern California. It's kind of stupid. Anyways, so I had a really interesting discussion, numerous things. One was we were talking about the draft and just the possibility of there being a draft in the future. And more specifically, like, should women be included in the draft? And I thought it was a very interesting discussion or question because it's like, well, one could argue that, yeah, they should. They get all the same benefits. They have asked for all the same benefits that men get. Excuse me. So if there's a draft, women should be included in the draft. Like, they should. And there's lots of women, not a majority, but there's lots of women who want to be in the armed forces. And that's cool. Now, personally, for me, I'm not a fan of the draft at all. I don't think it's applicable. I don't think it's the right thing. I don't like the concept of the draft. I prefer what Israel and South Korea does, which is mandatory military service for a year or so. And it's like a training thing. And it just kind of establishes, hey, everyone above everyone who's 18, you need to go and like know how to protect us and you and all that stuff. I think that has value, in my opinion. I'm not a fan of the draft where it's like, we're forcing you to be part of the military for 4 years. That doesn't make sense to me. Anyways, aside from that, that was kind of like a sidebar thing. I ran into this very wonderful gentleman who kind of did a breakdown of what he wanted to do with his life. And he wanted to get into accounting. And he had this whole plan. He's young. He's like 22 or something like that. And he's like, cool, I'm going to do this internship. They're going to pay me like $36 an hour. And it's going to be amazing. I'm going to do that for a bit. And then I'm going to move on to the next thing. And I'm going to work for that company for a bunch of years, make 6 figures, plus all these benefits. And then I'm going to get out of that and go in like the private sector and do that for a bit. And then I'm going to roll into this other thing. And it was so fascinating to me listening to him because the fundamental part of the argument or the discussion was the value of going and get a proper education at a school versus like learning and whatever. And I personally don't hold a lot of stock. I don't really like I don't like public school. There's a lot of private schools I could probably have issues with. And I'm frankly not a fan of college. And one could argue it's like, well, you haven't really, David, you haven't really done a lot of those things. So that's kind of mean of you to like judge people who've been there. And I'm like, look, I'm not judging people who have been there. I just find that I don't trust the institutions and the people primarily who support those institutions in general. So I'm sure there are individual teachers who are wonderful individuals, but I am finding that more and more and more, the kids that come up from public school and college tend to be very, very left-leaning individuals who have borderline extremist, arguably communistic perspectives. And I feel like that's totally counterintuitive to what made America. And the irony seems to be lost on these students where they're tweeting on a $1,500 phone and complaining while they're drinking their Starbucks about how unfair everything is. And it's like, okay. So simply put, I'm just going to say this, and this should be a shorter video, but my point is, if you want to go to college or if you're going to get education in general, I think it's imperative as a parent or as a kid or both to look at what is it that you're trying to learn and get, and is that something you can get elsewhere? Because I don't think the public school system has the best interest at heart for you. I don't. I think that if you want this information, I think you could probably get it cheaper, faster, better in another place. Now, that being said, if you're like, whatever, there's lots of reasons where, like, I'm a single mother and how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to provide for my family? How am I supposed to do this? Whatever your circumstances is. It can be Southern Belle, can be, Georgia lady. It can be anything. I don't really care. But I think it's important for your own self and for your own family to realize, like, how do I want my children to feel? How do I want them? What do I want them to know? And my simple breakdown of it is this. Education is kind of in three parts. So one being it teaches you what to think. And that's primarily public school and like the beginning parts of college. What to think. Like, hey, you need to think this way about this war, and here's some information to back that up. Whatever. Don't ask questions. Don't question the data. Just think this way about that thing. Cool. Fine. There's value to that. It's a bit like, I don't know, I want to get sci-fi on it, but it's a bit like, oh, let me plan in this information and you have to think this way. Two is when to think. That usually transpires in higher education, especially in certain stuff where as a pilot or as a doctor or as a lawyer or things of that nature that are higher level things, you need to be able to think and deal with problems as they come about. So you're elevated to this thing of like how to think, not what to think, but how to think, right? Or sorry, I messed that up. When to think. Like there is a time and a place. So for the most part, you follow the order. You do what everyone tells you. You're a doctor and you're like, do. And then there's that moment where you're there and it's like, oh, I have to solve this problem right now. I have to solve this specific problem. And you can't be living in this world of like, oh, well, this happens and this happens. And it's too slow. You have to be able to make a decision and solve the problem. Whether it's a pilot where it's like, oh, shoot, this happened. I have to do that. Or you're a lawyer. Like you can read all the stuff, but that there's a point when somebody says something you didn't expect, you need to be able to react. Okay? So we have what to think and when to think. And lastly, you have how to think, which in my experience, middle finger, not intention. In my opinion, how to think is very rarely taught. It's super unusual situation of educating people, and I think it can be done at a young age, all the way up to the concept of, hey, question what you think you know. Whether it's question math or science or whatever, or reading books. People you think are bad guys, explain how they're bad guys. Like have it explained to you and really debate the issue. And not just like, oh yeah, we did debates about this in high school or middle school. We did a couple debates once a year or whatever. Like, no, I mean like deep level understanding of things. Oh, sorry about all the bouncy. Anyways, and I feel like that's lacking because I run into time and time again when I do interact with younger people, and I just spent like a 3-day vacation that was supposed to be a 5-day vacation, but I was tired of it. And a lot of my time was spent around kids, and they were frustrating because a really bad level of responsibility. Like they didn't seem to care or really appreciate or really step up when things needed to be done. They were kind of just like, oh yeah, somebody else will handle it. And I wasn't raised that way, so it was weird to me. But aside from that, it felt like there was a lack of how to think. And when you do that, when you establish this concept of how to think, it's everything starts becoming a question. You know, with kids, we have this. Like when you have a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old kid, they start asking why. Everything is a why. And you as an adult are trying to like answer the question because you don't know. It just is. Like you're so in your world of like, this is how the world has been built, like this with the blocks, and you have children come in and they like shake it up. And I think that's something that everyone should maintain. Like you should maintain this idea of why is this a thing? Like why am I tipping the barista at Starbucks 20% to make my beverage? Why are you not making enough money? Why do I have to tip you on top of the money? Like what is going on? And I know that's a silly example, but it's so prolific in our society. We've just been tricked and trained to do things because it's normal, as opposed to asking like, but why am I doing this? So anyways, that's what this question is. It's a big why. It's a big like, maybe we should learn how to think. Anyways, Blab Man out. I love you. Talk to you soon. Bye.